Okay, so self-care, one of my favorite topics to talk about recently. That's what we're going to be talking about in this video. And I'm really excited about it because I think it's really important, and it's also, I feel like it's really misunderstood, especially I feel like in Christian circles. Because if you're like me, like before all this, when I would hear the term self-care, it was usually from somebody Instagram famous or something like that, and they obviously weren't Christians using the term, and I would immediately think of like some mom who's like, man, I'm so sick of my kids, I work really hard and I deserve to do time for myself away from the kids, and she goes and gets a pedicure while drinking, martinis or whatever. I feel like the general, and I might be alone here, but I feel like the general vibe about the term self-care is that it's inherently selfish and indulgent and wrong. That's the vibe that I've gotten. I've had a lot of people, and I've heard people in Christian circles say, that they don't believe in self-care and that it's something wrong that the culture is perpetuating and stuff like that. So like, is self-care bad? Is it good? I think there's like two different things that people talk about when they talk about self-care, and the first thing is more like selfish indulgence, where your heart is in a place of like bitterness and resentment, or just self-absorption, to the point where like maybe you don't care about your kids and you just care about yourself, but I think more likely just that you're like bitter and resentful of how hard it is and how little time you have to yourself, and so your heart is in a place of like bitterness and like self-pity, like self-focus, and I don't think that that is healthy. What I mean, and what professionals that I've met mean by self-care, is a scheduled break. I think should be a daily scheduled break from your usual tasks / stressors, to focus on relaxing your mind and body, recharging your mind and body, processing your emotions, and like working through your emotions so you're not just ignoring them, investing time in developing a healthy mind and healthy body. That's what I've come to understand self-care as. That's what's been suggested to me by professionals. So there's those two different definitions, and I feel like maybe some Christians. So first off, like, nobody does self-care. Like, no one that I know does self-care. Like, occasionally you have like, some Instagram famous mom or whatever, like, talk about the importance of self-care, and it doesn't seem like in actual life, especially in actual Christian life, that anybody like does this or whatever. I don't think I've met somebody who consciously practices self-care, because the reality is that moms are really bad at this, and we're gonna get into more detail about that later, but we're really bad at taking care of ourselves, and I think it's probably like 50% us and 50% our culture, the stereotypes, lack of support. But for whatever reason, I don't know any mom who actually takes care of herself in a way that means she's a healthy, functioning, emotionally and physically happy, functioning person. And that's not a judgment, as in like, man, you need to get your act together and take care of yourself. It's more like just an observation about the way motherhood is in general. I talk to a lot of moms who, and have experienced myself, the pressure as a mom to have it all together. Because, man, that lady over there, she has like 5 kids, and she seems like well-adjusted and loves being a mom, and I have like 1.5. The other one's not even out yet, and I'm like losing it. I don't want to have any more kids. Like, how do you do this? Like, why is that person seems like she's doing so well, and why am I doing so horrible? And she also has a side business selling essential oils, and she does Bible study and volunteers in the church nursery and all this stuff, and like, oh my gosh, I need to be able to do that. Like, that's what it means to be a good mom. Or like, man, she has a career and she takes care of her kids, and somehow she has time for her husband, and like, oh my gosh, I know I can't do that, like, I'm failing. So there's like all this pressure, I think, culturally, for moms to do it all, and to do it all with no help. Like, we're just, people told me like, oh, well, your motherly instincts will kick in and you'll know what to do. No, I don't. Motherhood did not come naturally for me. And here's the thing, even if it comes naturally for people, the reality is that you're human, and you're not supposed to do this life on your own, especially if you're a mother. So much as a mother is demanded of you, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and for a variety of reasons that we'll get into in a bit. Mothers in particular just don't take care of themselves. It's kind of a stereotypical joke. It's like, oh, I haven't showered in days. Oh, I haven't eaten all day. Or, oh, I've been up with my baby all night and I'm miserable and I'm tired. Almost like a badge of honor, the same way that like just devoting yourself to your work and staying late and working overtime and being exhausted for your work or whatever is like a cultural, it's like a really weird badge of honor. Like, for whatever reason, it doesn't happen, especially for moms, and we're going to get into why I think that is. But the reality is that you really need to. I think a lot of moms are really confident, which is great, and they're like, well, I can do it all. I don't want it to be any other way. Some moms feel the pressure, like myself, that describes myself, and feel like if they were to ask for help, that would be a sign of weakness, or they're not good mothers. Like, I still battle with that on a daily basis. I send my oldest to school part-time, and I have my mom in the house to help me take care of my baby. And I have a lot of guilt and shame for needing that help. So, and I feel like, this is basically like, well, why would you do self-care? Like, why do you need it? This harkens back to a lot of the first videos, which is, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of anybody else. It's the whole, you can't pour from an empty cup. My therapist likes to use the example of the oxygen mask. I can't remember if I've said this before, so if I have, like, sorry. But in planes, they always say, put yours on first before you put on someone else's. If you don't have yours on, you can't help other people. And I think maybe where the line is, and maybe what we have trouble with, is knowing, okay, when do I need my oxygen mask? If that makes sense. I know for myself, I push, and I'm like, well, I could ask for help, but I think I can do it by myself. I think I can keep going. I feel like I should. I think I can keep doing it. So I think there's a misunderstanding of like when you need the oxygen mask, when is your cup actually empty, and that sort of thing. And their answer is that it's going to be different for different people. For me right now, my empty cup means, okay, maybe I had to take care of my son all day, no school, for a couple days, and take care of a sick husband. This didn't happen recently at all. Like, that is empty. At the end of that ordeal last week, this week, yesterday, I was like way beyond empty. I was like crying constantly. I had my patience threshold. I feel like a really good indicator of like, okay, if you're empty or getting empty, is your patience threshold. If you have like no patience, then okay, girl, you need to go lock yourself in your room and take an hour or two. And if it's, you know, if you really, normally, like when you're happy, you have a really high threshold, but if it's like lowering, that's kind of like a signal, like, okay, I'm kind of running on empty now, I need to do something about it. Ultimately, the goal with self-care is to maintain that patience threshold, your wellness, your cup, so that you're not constantly in crisis mode, like, crap, my cup is empty, but there's nothing I can do right now, so I'm just like crazy mom, and I'm yelling at my kids, and I'm yelling at myself, and I'm going bonkers, or, you know, and again, that's not to judge or make fun of, but that's what can happen, you know, and again, like, my goal is not to judge you if you're doing this. The goal with saying these next few things is to point out, like, okay, if you're suffering from this, if you're experiencing this, if this is happening, this might be a good indicator that you might need to take some action here. And I'm not judging you because I've been there for all of this. So, you know, like the calling the kettle black. Never mind. I don't know. Just ignore that. I'm still recovering from the weekend, and it's obvious. But you know, if you're so depleted physically, emotionally, spiritually, that you're yelling at your kids, or you know, being emotionally not helpful with your kids, you know, you're not being able to like process their emotions, much less yours, you're snappy with your husband, or in more extreme cases like mine, you're having panic attacks or anxiety attacks, or again, like we've gone over, like depression, symptoms of depression, like you're not eating, you're not sleeping, that type of thing. If you're having those, any of those, you know, if you're not the mom or the human that you want to be, that's a really good sign that your cup is empty, and you shouldn't try to do more because you're at your limit, and you need to take some action and take care of yourself. Now, women, I believe, are designed by God with this innate, amazing strength that is completely different from a man's, and that men can't even understand. I think it's this inner strength basically to push through impossible situations and like keep going when those situations should kill us and should like take us down. We push through. So like giving birth is a great example. We're all moms. Giving birth, like, I don't know if you've seen any of the videos of men having like labor simulations, and they last like 10 minutes, and they're like, make it stop, and I'm over here watching them like 24 plus hours. Like, I mean, like, yeah, women are incredibly strong. Like, you literally push through that and have a baby, and that's something that like men just can't comprehend, that type of strength. You know, men can handle like a punch to the face, right? But they couldn't handle having a baby. Or, you know, there's studies that show that women are significantly better at functioning and handling chronic illness and chronic pain, way better than men. You know, like if you've ever had a man with a cold, like, you know, like they are out at the first symptom of a cold. And you're sick, and you don't even tell them that you're sick, because to you it's like, this is my life, I have to keep going, like I don't get to stop. Like, that's a huge strength that is unique to women that men don't have. And to be totally honest, one of my favorite shows is Super Nanny. I can't remember if I mentioned this before. If this is all like totally on repeat, then like I'm really sorry. But I really love Super Nanny. But it's interesting if you watch the shows, like she comes in and like helps these families, you know, be better parents basically. And especially when it comes to like bedtime. So like 9 times out of 10, Like, you put the kids back to bed over and over and over and over until they stay in bed, so you like win that battle, right? And 9 times out of 10, the dad quits after like 10 minutes. And it's the mom who's the one who's exhausted physically and emotionally. She pushes through no matter what till she gets her kids in bed and they stay asleep. And the dad, like, just completely gives up. Like, that's a strength that women have. Like, we keep going when men stop. Like, we can keep going. And I think that's an amazing God-given ability that's unique to women. But I think just because we can push through doesn't mean we should, and it doesn't mean that it's good for us. I think it's one of those things where we need it and use it on special, occasions where it's necessary, like having a baby or, another like type of crisis where like you have to push through or everything would fall apart. But I think as moms, we kind of live in that mode. And I don't think that's, super healthy. And I think that it can, if we're in this mode constantly and we don't stop ourselves and no one stops us, like it can get to the point where we experience mental health issues, which is why we're here. So practicing self-care can prevent mental illness, and it maintains a healthy mental state. So the goal, in other words, is not to get past self-care or not to get past taking care of yourself. This is not a temporary fix. Like, you might need more time the deeper you are in a mental illness, but the goal is not to get past this. Because what you don't want to have happen is be like, okay, look, I just need a day break, I just need a break, and then I'm going to go back to doing the same thing. You don't want to be constantly in, disaster mode. You don't want to be constantly picking up after the explosion or you know what I mean? Like, you want to be in a place where you can maintain a healthy mental and emotional state. So that's what self-care does. Regular, scheduled self-care practice that contributes to maintaining a healthy mental, emotional, physical, spiritual state. And again, for a lot of moms, it means the basics, like showering and eating, drinking water. So I think some of the reasons that it is really hard for moms to realize that they need a break, or even if they realize it, to actually get a break, is, I think it's like, okay, so like threefold. We already talked about how like society's standards for women are to have a job, a career, take care of the house, make homemade dinner organically, and be a mother to our children and have it all and not need help. And that's a very poisonous, false message that we're getting. So there's that. I think that in and of itself is why a lot of moms, myself included, don't take the time. Another reason is we don't have support. So let me just say that if you're going to, and you really should, do regular scheduled self-care for yourself. I don't care if you don't have a mental illness or not. I really think that as a mother, you need to do this. Just my opinion, but whatever. It's going to involve accommodation on other people's part. Because I don't think you can do self-care when your kids nap, because if you're like me, you don't turn off when your kids nap. You're constantly waiting. And if you have a baby, you know that, okay, you might want them to take a 2-hour nap, but they might even not even do 40 minutes. So you're constantly on. You're the responsible person for your kids. So I think that self-care means it's a set scheduled time where you are off duty. You are not responsible for the kids. I don't care if it's outside the home or you lock yourself in your bedroom. It needs to be time where you're not directly responsible for your kids. It needs to be kid-free completely. And that's going to involve most likely an accommodation on your husband's part, but possibly also from family and friends. And unfortunately, I've talked to a lot of women who their husbands aren't supportive. They feel like, what do you do all day? Like, I'm the one who works. Like, why do you need a break? You know. And if that's your husband, then tell him to watch the last video where my Coast Guard helicopter maintenance, helicopter flying husband, who is an incredibly stressful and strenuous job in every way, says that he would rather do that, and that that's way less stressful than taking care of 2 children all day. Most women, a lot of women, okay, not most, a lot of people have more kids than that, even. So just direct him to that video. And a lot of people have husbands who aren't supportive. They're just not accommodating, or they have something else going on. There's like, well, I have this going on, or that, whatever it is, they're just not willing and supportive of you. Those husbands, if that describes your husband, like, you either need to speak up, because a lot of women are like me, and if people don't actually say, I would like to help you, I don't end up asking them. So some of you need to speak up and say, this is a big deal, I need you to take the kids for an hour after work every evening, or I need you to make dinner and entertain the boys, or I need you to, you know, whatever it is. I need this hour, I need this 2 hours, I need this half hour to myself, so I can, like, work on myself. And if your husband isn't in a mental state where he's wants to do that or is agreeing to, then he frankly needs a kick in the pants. Again, direct him to last video. A lot of husbands theoretically are willing, but they feel like they don't know how to take care of their kids, and if that's the case, then teach them. And this kind of gets into the third reason I think women don't practice self-care or care about their mental health. And that is the illusion of control. And I think we all have it in some way, but I've noticed it in some women more so than other problems. And like, I can't tell you how many women I've talked to who are like, man, I would really like some free time, I'd like this, I'd like that, and I'll either suggest or mention like, oh, well, what if your husband took the kids? And surprisingly, a lot of the responses are, well, but I have to do the kids for this reason or for that reason. Either they don't trust their husband to do the kids the way they do it, or they're anxious about a disaster happening and them not being there to deal with it with their kids. Or, you know, a lot of people, it extends to babysitting, like getting childcare, and like, okay, so trauma, and a really bad experience with childcare, or like, you know, someone else watching your kids is a real thing, and that, you know, that's a whole other issue, and if that's your situation, I feel like you should talk to a professional like a therapist to work through that, and you might need to get creative with your options, or like really insist that your husband take your kids, or whatever. But for some people it extends to babysitting to the point where like it's beyond like normal concern. Like obviously you should, you know, pick somebody you love and trust with their kids. You can even have a nanny cam if you are really that concerned. But like I know someone who, even with her, you know, her most trusted friends and even her husband, like she can't leave them at home. Like she won't. She refuses. Like, I'm never trusting my kids with anybody except for me. So I don't get a break. And I think as moms, and women, I think in general, I feel like we have a really hard time of letting go control, especially of kids. And it makes sense. Like hormonally, everything is telling us like, kids are everything. Mom's zombie robot. The reality is that that's not healthy, and it's also not true. You know, kids, God has given you kids to take care of, but the Bible doesn't say, you know, kill yourself for your kids or ignore everything else in your life except for your kids. There's a difference between putting your kids' needs in front of your own and like blocking out everything else except for your obsession with your kids. I think that can be really unhealthy for you and your kids. And I think, you know, for moms who are afraid, or not even afraid, moms who feel like, well, if I leave my kids with my husband, he's not going to care for them the way I do, or if I'm not there for a crisis or if something happens, it's not going to be dealt with right. I think that is a lie that we tell ourselves, whether you're dealing with anxiety, depression, or, you know, just even like control, you know. I think you need to, it's good for us to realize, again, why I can't recommend therapists enough, because it's really hard to realize this on your own when you're in the middle of it. You need somebody else who can look from the outside and say, okay, this is what I see as a problem. You need to, but somehow you need to realize, like, okay, my control and perfectionism is unhealthy for me and my kids. For instance, like, when I finally realized that I was being that way about my son, like, I was obsessive about his eating. That was a real trigger for me. And I was uncomfortable leaving him with anybody, especially not my husband, because he was a lot less stressed about it. Because I was like, he's not going to eat the right foods. He's not going to be a good eater if he doesn't eat the right foods. And if my husband feeds him, like, he's not going to be as careful as I am, and maybe my kid isn't going to eat. And that was... And once I realized that, like, that was perfectionism, which is impossible. And once I realized that, like, I was putting that on my son, my perfectionism, and how debilitating and poisonous the illusion of perfectionism and control is. And once I realized that I was passing that on to my son by my expectations of him and for the people who care for him, and how toxic that is, that really motivated me to let go a little bit, trust God with my kids. And we're going to talk about that in the next video, because I still struggle with that. And I think it's a really difficult struggle for moms to simultaneously be, especially if you're nursing, like, your body maintained and created this child on its own, and for a lot of mothers, your body still does with breastfeeding, and you're your kid's everything. Like, it's really hard to comprehend that, and the fact that, okay, but we don't have complete control over our children's lives. We need to stop kidding ourselves that we do, and God's in control. Like, those are kind of like this. So if that's what you're struggling with, like, I totally understand. I still struggle with that, but I believe what the truth is that we need to let go and trust our children to God, because our health and our mental health, physical health, it matters, and it starts to affect our children's and our well-being starts to affect our children's well-being if we're not taking care of it. You have to want it enough. You know, like, a lot of people are like, you know, we don't have money for a therapist, or we don't, you know, my husband works a lot of hours, he can't do it, or he's not willing to, or he doesn't know how, or I don't trust him with it, or, you know, I don't know where to start with a therapist, or whatever. Like, those are all, you know, you have to want it enough. Because there's a way to get help and to care for yourself with any situation. Sometimes it might take more creativity than others, and I get that that's intimidating, but the reality is you have to want it enough. You have to care enough to get this dealt with and to get some help. So those are some reasons I think that it's really hard to, and I think if we were to take action and push past those, we'd all be a lot happier. Our kids would be a lot happier. Our marriages would be a lot happier, says Dr. Hadley. So, okay, so what would you do in self-care? And I think, again, the answer is going to depend on the person, but what I believe about self-care is that it's, again, what we talked about earlier. It's activities that are mentally, emotionally, and physically restorative. And relaxing in the sense that you can let go of your stressors and responsibilities, as in like your normal daily work, to focus on taking care of your emotions, your mind, your spirit, and your body. So again, like taking a shower, stretching, exercising is a big one. And spiritually, for me, when I do self-care, I take an hour. So I take an hour during the day, like midday, to do to take care of my body with exercise, to take care of my spirit with reading and praying, and my mind and emotions by a lot of times I journal, and so that's a place for me to process my emotions instead of just stuffing them or letting them build up. So that's a huge self-care item for me, is like taking the time to think about what's going on in my brain and to process that. And then I usually do something that is enjoyable for me to do, that's not mind-numbing. It's not a brainless activity like watching TV or napping, or being on my phone. And it's also not a chore that I involve or work that I involve. So like, I really enjoy cleaning. It's very satisfying. I love folding laundry because I get to watch my show, Super Nanny, and I have a snack and I fold, and it's like during the kids' naps, and it's great. But the reality is that those are still chores, those are still work, those still take an effort, and if you're constantly efforting, you're gonna run out of oomph. So I make myself not do chores. So for me, a fun, relaxing activity that's still engaging my mind and soul and all that is reading. I love reading. So I make time every day to read a little bit. It doesn't have to be hours as much as I would like that, but I make time to read just a little bit. I feel like sometimes, this is gets a little nerdy, but I feel like sometimes like the way to getting into a good habit and actually falling into a habit is not necessarily to be like, okay, well, I need to read, so I'm going to read for an hour every day and I'm going to get through a book a month or like 3 books a month. The goal, I feel like, if you want to make a habit, you start small. Like, okay, my goal is to read for 15 minutes a day. And it's a more reasonable expectation, but that's kind of nerdy, and I'm super nerdy about habits, so whatever. But yeah, like, you don't have to go overboard. You can start small. I think for some people, like, maybe doing their hair or makeup is something enjoyable, and they're taking care of their body. Yoga is another one. I don't do yoga because I have issues and it hurts, so I go for walks. But I know yoga is a huge one. A lot of people like to meditate, reading, and taking baths. I love taking baths, Epsom salts, so I don't hurt. There's all sorts of things, and it's going to depend on who you are and what your needs are. But I think the principle of like saving brainless activities, because there's definitely a time and place for that. There's definitely a time and place for like numbing out and watching a TV show. But I don't think it has a place in this type of self-care, as in like this is the bare minimum. We're taking care of our minds and bodies. I don't think that has a place there, and I also don't think chores or even like activities that you really enjoy but that are a lot of effort, I think that needs its own separate time, and that's a whole other issue. But specifically self-care, I think, is relaxing activities that replenishes your mind and body and spirit. I've said those words a lot. So I guess I should say what I do. So I take that hour, like I said, during like midday, and then I get up a half an hour before I'm needed, and I shower. If that if I didn't schedule that time, I wouldn't shower. I would like either sleep all the way till 7, or I would like dink around on my phone or something. I would definitely sleep till 7. But I get up half an hour early, and my husband either listens for the kids if they're not up yet, or if they get up, he starts their breakfast, so I don't have to like rush. I know I for sure have half an hour. And I shower. My thing is I do a little bit of makeup, and I wear real clothes, because for me that is definitely taking care of myself, and it makes me feel like I'm alive and not a complete bag of just, slob and disaster. I feel like I have more self-respect for myself, but again, it varies for everybody. So I have that, which is like mostly when I focus like on my body, and then I also read and pray. Hopefully first thing in the morning, but sometimes I pray when my kid is up and eating breakfast. So a lot of times I do a second actually like deep reading and praying in my mid-morning self-care time. And then I'll be honest, this week was really, really difficult. So Thanksgiving, my kid was out of school and my husband was sick. And, it was, I'm having a vulnerable moment here. And I have unknown stomach and digestion issues. I think it might be IBS. I have no idea. It might be a food allergy, but basically it takes a lot of effort to make separate food that I need. And it's challenging to come up with variety because I've cut most things out of my diet. So especially this last week, and in general, from just building up, I think from the month, I'd get done making everybody else's food every day, and by the time I was done with that, I had no energy or desire to make my own food. So I'd eat like rice cakes all day, every day. And the result is that I feel freaking awful, and I didn't have enough time and support in order to care for my basic needs. So I happen to have a very supportive husband, and we talked about it last night after a giant meltdown, and we are making it work. We're making time to either having time that I have on top of having self-care, not sacrificing my time for self-care, time to make food, or having him help me make food. So anyways, so that's me. That's where I'm at. It's really hard. I feel like it's really easy to just fall right back into like taking care of other people at the expense of yourself. The first thing to go is my self-care. And, a lot of that, a lot of people don't have supportive husbands or spouses or whatever, but even if you do have a supportive spouse, if you don't tell them or do something about yourself, they might not realize. They won't realize it unless you tell them. So, really, again, like, you have to want it. You have to, take responsibility for yourself and realize, okay, I have sacrificed my self-care time for this activity, and it's obviously causing problems, and I need to change. And again, you don't have to change it yourself. You can ask for help. It's not all on you. That's the whole point of this. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to ask me, because I love talking about this topic. And for the record, I think that there is definitely a time and place for getting pedicures. So, ideally, I think, life is, a lot of people like, life is a balance. And if there's part to that that's true, like, ideally, you'd have a balance between, taking care of your children, spending time with them, taking care of yourself, having time for your hobbies and your, enjoyments, and having, time with your husband. Okay, so this is a side note, and bear with me, but I think it's an important side note. Did I already say that with something else? If I did, I'm sorry. Like, I'm serious. Like, this is what happens when I don't take care of myself. I'm I'm not there. But, okay. I know couples with kids, who live by family, who are family or friends who are super willing to take care of their kids while they go on a date. And I talk to these people, and I'm like, they tell me that they haven't been on a date since their kids were born. And I am like, you had family around who was willing to help you. Why are you not taking advantage of that? Because until like a couple months ago, my parents, nobody, I didn't have anybody I knew living by me, much less like somebody I'd actually like trust my kids with. Because, and I think that, you know, you have to, as a couple, you have to have time by yourselves, away from your kids. I don't care if it's like a fancy dinner. A lot of people are like, well, I don't like going out to fancy dinners. I don't believe in date night. Like, okay, whatever. You don't have to have a night. It doesn't have to be night. It doesn't have to be eating. You know, it can be whatever you want it to be, as long as you're alone and away from your kids. Like, I don't know what Sam and I would do if we don't have regular time to ourselves. Like, I honestly don't know. Like, we're poor. People don't get paid very much in the military if you're enlisted. And before my parents came, we slimmed down on so many things to pay for babysitting every other week to get some time alone. And it was completely worth it, and I think we would have completely fallen apart and not be married, or be really unhappily married if we didn't. So I feel like that's part of it. And I think maybe I forgot to mention this too, with if you have an unsupportive husband, or if he's just for some reason not realizing or able to understand where you're coming from, and he doesn't understand how hard it is for you, take him to a therapist. You know, again, it doesn't mean that your marriage is a failure if you're going to a therapist. It just means that, you know, life is hard. And, you know, sometimes when you're so deep in a situation, it's really hard. Or if you're not completely trained professional in dealing with emotions and the psyche, you know, sometimes you need help understanding parts of your body and your being that you might not know what to deal with. So you can always see counseling. And again, like, I really honestly, I can't recommend seeing a therapist enough. Don't be friends with me, because I will talk you into seeing a therapist. So anyways, I really apologize if I was like acting really tired and forgetful during that video, but that's where I'm at. So thank you for watching, and I really hope that this is helpful. Like, I hope that somehow through my like babbling that there was some slivers of usefulness. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. And our next video, I'm gonna kind of talk about like what my spiritual experience was with a mental illness and stuff like that. More rambling. So I will see you next Tuesday.